To watch these important lessons, subscribe to DP Education's YouTube channel right now. Click on the bell icon to stay updated on the latest lessons. Sri Lanka's largest free online school, DP Education.
So my dear children, in the earlier chapter we discussed several MCQ questions related to the lesson part. Now with this chapter, we'll be discussing several other types of questions, right, related to the natural disasters lesson. Right, so first of all, you are given the second type of question. Now here you need to write down the correct answers. Okay, so write 3 natural disasters faced by Sri Lanka. 3 natural disasters faced by Sri Lanka. So we discussed 4 natural disasters within the lesson part that faced by the Sri Lanka: drought, landslide, flood and lightning. So from those 4 you can write any 3. So we can write floods, drought, landslide. Flood, drought and landslide. Okay, right, next one. What are the 2 types of floods? So the 2 types of floods. One type is floods due to overflow of water. Okay, due to overflow of water, there can be flood. Okay, so number 1, so I have mentioned due to overflow of waterways. This is number 1. If you want, you can provide examples like rivers, streams. Then second one is instantaneous flood. So instantaneous flood occur due to blockage of drainage systems, mainly because of blocking of drainage systems in urban areas. Okay, right. So these are the 2 types of floods. Okay, the 2 main types of floods. Next one. Name 3 areas with high possibility of landslide. 3 areas. So you can write 3 districts that has high possibility of landslide. So 3 districts with high possibility of landslide. So these areas or these districts should have a high or greater altitude. So areas like Nuwara, Kandy and Matale. These areas will have a greater altitude. So therefore, my dear children, these areas have a high possibility of landslide. Okay, they have high possibility of landslide because of having high altitude. Right, the next question. What is called as El Nino effect? So the El Nino effect, it's the increasement of surface temperature in water in the Pacific Ocean. Okay, in the Pacific Ocean, increasing the temperature of surface water. Within the surface, the temperature is getting increased. So this particular condition is the one which is referred as the El Nino effect. Okay, El Nino effect. So we can write the answer. Increasing surface temperature in water of the Pacific Ocean. So increasing surface temperature in water of the Pacific Ocean is referred as El Nino effect. This is the El Nino effect, my dear children. Right, then the next one. So define given in short. So you have to write down short, very short answers for these each conditions. Okay. So what do you mean by drought? Drought means lack of rainfall for a long time period. Okay, lack of rainfall for a long time period within a certain area. Okay, so that condition is referred as drought. You know that upon receiving less amount of rainfall, the water within that area is going to reduce. So that condition is the one which is referred as drought. So as they are mentioning to write down short definitions, you can write down like this. Lack of rainfall, for a long time period, creating lack of water. Okay, so I have mentioned that lack of water thing also. That by including that thing, we can give out a more perfect answer, no? So here, lack of rainfall for a long time period, creating lack of water can be considered as a drought. Flood. So flood means overflow of waterways or overflow of water in rivers or in drainage systems or in drains. Right? So this can be simply referred as a flood. So we can write down the answer. Overflow of water in waterways right? For examples, we can mention rivers, ponds, then drains. Okay, this is a simple definition, no? So it's more suitable for the question given here. So overflow of water in waterways, a simple definition for flood. What are the examples for waterways? Rivers, ponds and drains. Okay, drains. Next one, landslide. Landslide means slipping down of land with muddy water or slipping down of soil with muddy water, right? So here I have mentioned highlands also. So by that way our answer would be perfect, my dear children, because sometimes the land will slip down in lower areas too. But however, if that thing is going to occur within highlands, then my dear children, we can consider that incident as a natural disaster of landslide. Okay, so slipping down of soil with muddy water in highlands. So this is called as the landslide. So drought means, my dear children, lack of rainfall for a long time period, creating lack of water. Okay, so this is drought. Flood, it is caused by overflow of water in waterways like rivers, ponds and drains. Then landslide, slipping down of soil with muddy water in highlands. This is landslide. Okay, then the next question. Write 3 reasons each for drought, flood and landslide. Okay, so you have to mention 3 reasons. They are not mentioning whether the reason is a natural reason or else a human activity. So you can write any. Okay, so what are the reasons for drought? So drought is mainly occurring because of lack of rainfall, lack of monsoon winds. Okay, lack of monsoon winds, lack of rainfall, and also due to El Nino effect. Those are the natural causes, and there are several human causes or human activities as well, like irregular constructions, excessive usage of water, right, wastage of water, deforestation and so on. Okay, right, so we can write down the answers. Now when you are writing down the answers, my dear children, always be simple. When you are writing down these questions, answers for these questions, always try to be simple. Means don't go for heavy words. Check, when I'm writing answers, I'm not going to use very heavy words, right? I'm always using very simple words. So when you are answering questions for a paper, you have to be very tricky. I know that you guys are very clever, but however, when you are answering papers, try to be very simple. Try to give very simple answers, right, that are more accurate. So by that way, you can score more. So always try to give very simpler answers rather than deforestation. We know that deforestation means cutting down trees, no? So we can write cutting down trees, right? I'll write down simple answers here. I mean, like, if you can write deforestation, it's okay. But however, here, when I'm writing down the answers, I will be always using, my dear children, very simple answers, very simple responses. It's because when you are now, when the person or when the teacher is going to mark your paper, it's quite easy to mark. And also, if you are using very simpler things, then, my dear children, the mistakes that you make is also going to reduce. So when you are answering the questions, you have to be very tricky, right? So we'll write down the answers then. Drought, lack of rainfall. This is the main reason. Lack of rainfall. Then El Nino effect. Then I'll write a human interference. Overuse of water. Overuse of water for droughts. Then for floods. Floods. So Heavy rain is the main reason for flood. Heavy rain. Okay. So after that, blocking of drains or drains, if the drains are being blocked, then my dear children, there's a risk of what? Flood. Okay. So other than that, irregular constructions, overuse of the land, then these things will also cause floods. Most of the incidents or most of the cases, right, that is going to cause flood are human interferences. Most of the cases are human interferences. Heavy rain is a natural cause, however. Okay, so we can write down the answers. Heavy rain. Heavy rain. Then blocking drains. Blocking drains. Then irregular constructions. Irregular constructions. So heavy rain, blocking drains and irregular constructions are reasons for flood. Then the next one, landslide. Once again, irregular constructions. After that, heavy rain is also going to cause landslide. Heavy rain. Heavy rain. Then cutting down trees or cutting trees, especially in highlands. Right, especially in highlands, because trees helps to keep or bond soil together. Okay, so if the trees are being cut down, the bond between the soil will get reduced and it will easily, right, after that water will easily soak into the highlands, creating landslides. Okay, so cutting down trees in highlands also a main cause for the creation of landslides. So irregular constructions, heavy rain and cutting trees in highlands are main reasons for landslides, my dear children. So these are the causes of drought, flood and landslide. Okay, right. Next one, write 3 natural reasons for a drought. 3 natural reasons for drought. So what are the 3 natural reasons? In the earlier case also we discussed that thing. Number 1, lack of winds. Lack of monsoon winds or lack of timely winds, right? So we can refer that thing as lack of winds, no problem. Okay, right? Lack of monsoon winds, that's the correct answer. So lack of monsoon winds is the correct answer. So I'll mention monsoon as well, my dear children. That would be perfect, no? So we'll be writing down the most perfect answer in that case, no? So we'll write down the monsoon as well. So lack of monsoon winds. Okay, lack of monsoon winds. Number 2, dry air currents. you know that dry air currents also going to cause droughts, right? So dry air currents. So dry air currents is also helpful to drain out or evaporate water in the surface of a particular land. Okay, so that will also, my dear children, create a drought season. Next one. In the earlier question also we wrote this thing. So this is El Nino effect. El Nino effect. So El Nino effect, my dear children, it's the special condition that is going to occur because of increasing the surface temperature of water in the Pacific Ocean. So that's the El Nino effect. So it's going to create, or it's going to change the wind pattern and the rainfall pattern in Sri Lanka. That's how this will affect for a drought. Okay, so these are the three main natural reasons for a drought. Natural reasons for a drought: lack of monsoon winds, dry air currents, El Nino effect. Okay, right. State 5 ways to minimize bad effects of drought. 5 ways to minimize bad effects of drought. Okay. So, to minimize the bad effect of drought, we can do these things, or we can follow these ways. First and foremost thing is to minimize the water wastage. Okay. Minimize the overuse of water. So, we can write the answer. Minimizing overuse of water. Then, number 2. It's good to minimize the overuse or excess usage of water. And also, if you can collect rainwater, or if you can collect rainwater more often, then, my dear children, if a drought season would come, then we can minimize the bad effect. Okay. So, the second one would be what? Collecting rainwater. Collecting rainwater. Then there are several agricultural activities that we can do to avoid the bad effects of drought. Number 1, we can grow drought resistant crops. Okay, drought resistant crops like wheat. So, wheat and corn, right? Corn is also a drought resistant crop. Next one, growing drought resistant crops. Growing drought resistant crops. Next one, number 4. Next one would be, my dear children, you have heard about this thing, mulching, right? Mulching can also be practiced in order to protect or save water, conserve water. Mulching. Then, using proper using proper ways to add water, right? Using proper ways to add water to agricultural lands. Using proper ways to add water to agricultural lands. So this is giving out a heavy effect, right, for the drought seasons. It's because that, my dear children, most of the waterways or most of the ways that we add water for agricultural lands, that would definitely use excess water, or that will waste water heavily. So when watering the plants or when watering the agricultural lands, always we have to use proper methods. Otherwise, the wastage of water will get increased. And because of that, the bad effects given out by the drought season will also get increased. Okay. So it's very important to follow up or use proper ways to add water to our agricultural lands. Okay. Right. So these are several ways to minimize bad effects of drought. Okay. Other than that, we can write down minimize the deforestation, right? Or else we can write reforestation, right? Then after that we can write, like if there are tanks, then we can increase the volume of tanks and other waterways. So like that way there are several answers. Okay, there are several answers, but however they are mentioning only to write down 5. No, so writing down 5 is enough. Okay, so let's head on to see what are the other questions. State 5 ways to manage the flood disaster. 5 ways to manage flood disaster. So, number 1. 5 ways to manage the disaster caused by flood. First and foremost thing is going into a elevated place or going to highlands. That's a good thing. So, going to a highland. Right, going to a highland. Then number two, cleaning drains. Cleaning drains. Now, cleaning drains is also a good thing to follow to manage the disaster caused by the flood. Because by cleaning the drains, we can, up to a certain extent, we can avoid the disaster caused by the flood. Because that instantaneous flood mainly occurs because of blocking drains. So, if we can clean them, then my dear children, we can avoid these instantaneous flood, right? Number 3, right? Number 3 then. Number 3. Following instructions given by government, right? Following instructions given by government. So the government or the authorities will come and going to give you several instructions. So definitely you have to follow these instructions. Okay. Next one. Disconnecting disconnecting electricity supply. Disconnecting electricity supply in house. Disconnecting electricity supply in house. So it's important to disconnect the electricity supply in houses if you are facing a threat of flood, because I told you that for the areas that has a risk of flood, there can be accidents related to electricity, mainly because of water. Okay, then next one, always using purified water. Always using purified water for drinking. So why it is suitable to use purified water for drinking? Pure water, right? We need to use pure water. So I'll mention always using pure water for drinking. Rather than the purified water, it is much more probable to write down as pure water. It's because sometimes you might think, now purified water, no. So you can filter water by using normal, you can take normal filtration unit, then you can usually filter it and drink. But however, the probability of getting a communicable disease will increase in that case, my dear children. So in order to manage the disaster caused by the flood, we should have to be safe. So in order to be safe, we have to be healthy. Okay, we have to be healthy. So in that case, my dear children, it's very important to use pure water for the drinking processes. Okay, for the drinking process, for drinking, my dear children, especially, it's very important to use pure water, right? So rather than purified water, I have mentioned pure water because it's very probable to use bottled water, right? Bottled mineral water, if you can, then it is more probable to use bottled mineral water during a season of flood. Okay, don't go for the water sources or waterways which are available in your areas, because I told you that these waterways will be contaminated because of the flood. So in that case, my dear children, if you use those kind of, or if you drink that kind of contaminated water, you might get sick because of the bacteria and the types of parasites living inside the contaminated water. So it's important to use pure water in this case. Okay, in order to avoid from, or in order to destroy these communicable diseases, right? So here, always using pure water for drinking is a good method to follow in order to avoid the bad effects of flood disaster. Okay, right. So going into a highland, that would be the perfect thing to do. Then cleaning drains, that is also good because we can avoid the instantaneous flood. Then following instructions given by the government. Then disconnecting electricity supply in house. Then always using pure water for drinking. These are the things that we can do, or that we can follow in order to avoid the bad effects of flood. Okay. State 5 pre-signs of landslide. 5 pre-signs of landslide. Right. Number 1. Appearing new springs. appearing new springs. Okay. Then sometimes, my dear children, these springs will disappear. So drying out right? So appearing new springs and also sudden dry out of springs. Both these incidents or both these cases are pre-signs of landslide. Pre-signs of landslide. Then trees will dry. In trees will die in slopes, right? Now in a slope, if there are several trees, then they will die because the bottom layer of soil is not there. So they won't be able to absorb water. Okay. Then appearing cracks. Right? Appearing cracks in houses. Right? In houses. Appearing cracks in houses. Next one, number 5. Number 5. Abnormal behavior. Abnormal behavior in animals. So there can be some animals who are showing abnormal behaviors. Okay. So if animals are showing abnormal behaviors, then that can be a pre-sign of landslide. Okay. Right. So my dear children, these are the pre-signs of landslide. Okay. Appear in new springs and sometimes sudden dry out of springs. Trees will die in slopes and appearing cracks in houses and buildings also, right? Then abnormal behavior in animals. So these are the pre-signs that can be observed during a landslide, not during, but before a landslide. These are some pre-signs that we can observe. Right. State 5 ways to manage landslide disaster. 5 ways to manage landslide disaster. Right. Number 1. Growing trees. Growing trees in highlands. Right. Growing trees in highlands. Especially if there are like slopes like thing, then we can use this growing trees thing. Okay. Then using cover crops. Using cover crops. Number 3. Or else we'll write down using proper agricultural methods. That is perfect. Using proper agricultural methods, right? Using proper agricultural methods. This is also very important to overcome the hazards created due to landslide. Then minimizing constructions, in highlands. So it is very important to minimize the constructions that are getting created within highlands. Okay, if you can, right? Actually, if we can, it's very important to minimize the constructions created within the highlands. Okay, it's more probable to create, or it's more probable to minimize these constructions, because by that way, if there is a sudden landslide which is going to occur, right, then the loss of lives and also damages to the properties can be minimized. Then, my dear children, minimizing constructions in highlands. Then number 5, minimizing irregular land use. Minimizing irregular land use. So if we are using land, especially highlands, for our agricultural purposes or any other purposes, so it's very important to minimize these usage, right? Especially these irregular usage. Okay, so by that way we can avoid the hazardous events caused due to landslides. Right then, so growing trees in highlands, using cover crops, using proper agricultural methods, minimizing constructions in highlands, and minimizing irregular land use can be followed in order to manage the landslide disaster, my dear children. Right, then the next question. State 5 bad influences occur due to lightning. 5 bad influences that can occur due to lightning. Okay. Number 1. Loss of lives. Loss of lives. Then number 2. Damages to properties, or else we'll mention damages to houses, comma, buildings, right? Damages to houses, comma, buildings. Next one, number 3, loss of lives, damages to houses, comma, buildings. Then number 3, so damages to houses and buildings. Then we can write again damages to properties. Damages to properties. For example, you can write wiring systems, then conductors, electrical appliances, right? Electrical appliances. Then number 4, causing acid rains. Causing acid rains. Number 5, loss of power, right? Within brackets you can include electricity. So these are bad influences that can occur due to lightning. Loss of lives, obvious. Damages to houses and buildings, and also damages to properties like wiring systems, conductors and electrical appliances. Next one, acid rains, causing acid rains. You know that our environment contains nitrogen gas. So when lightning is going to occur, this nitrogen gas is going to separate and nitrogen is going to bond with oxygen to create nitrogen oxides, oxides of nitrogen. So these nitrogen oxides, okay, oxides of nitrogen is finally getting bonded with the water. You know that during lightning time period, water is plenty available due to rain. So this nitrogen oxides is going to again react or bond with water to create a special acid called nitric acid. Nitric acid. So my dear children, this nitric acid will come down as acid rains. Okay, acid rains. So causing acid rains is also a main reason, right, that can happen due to lightning. Okay, due to lightning. Then the next one, loss of power or loss of electricity. This is very obvious. You know that sometimes due to heavy lightning, these transformers and other conductors that can carry the electrical supply to your houses will get interfered. And by that way, my dear children, what will happen? Loss of power or loss of electricity will occur. Right. So these are the bad influences that can occur due to lightning. Right. Right. 3 human activities that may cause a drought. 3 human activities that may cause a drought. Number 1. Excess usage of water. Right, excess usage of water. Next one, irregular land use. Irregular land use. Then number 3, cutting down trees. Right, cutting down trees. So like I said, always try to be very simple. So try to provide very simple answers which are correct. Okay, so 3 human activities that may cause a drought: excess usage of water, irregular land use, cutting down trees. Okay. Then the next question, my dear children. State 5 ways to manage lightning hazards. 5 ways to manage lightning hazards. Number 1. Disconnecting electrical appliances. right? Disconnecting electrical appliances. Then not going outside. Not going outside. Within brackets, you can use open areas. Then number 3, wearing a dry pair of slippers. Right? Wearing a dry pair of slippers. Then number 4, avoid touching So avoid touching or using water. Number 5. Avoid using telephones. Right? Avoid using telephones. So these are the things that we can follow to manage the or to avoid bad defects caused due to lightning. Okay. So disconnecting electrical appliances, not going outside within brackets to open areas, wearing a dry pair of slippers, avoid touching or using water, avoid using telephones. Okay. So these are the things that we can follow in order to manage the hazard of lightning. Right then, we'll head on to see the next question. State 3 things to avoid during a lightning weather condition. 3 things to avoid during a lightning weather condition. Right? So, number 1. Using electrical appliances. Using electrical appliances. Then walking on wet places. Walking on wet places. Then my dear children, we can write being in open places, comma, near tall trees. So being in open places, comma, near tall trees. So we need to avoid these things. Other than that, we need to avoid touching conductors like metals and other stuff, right? So during lightning weather condition, these things are very important to follow. So number 1 given, using electrical appliances. Then walking on wet places. Then being in open places and near tall trees. So we should have to avoid these things during a lightning weather condition. It's important to not to do these things, my dear children, and also it's very important to not to touch okay, conductors or metals during a lightning weather condition. Right then, state 5 things that can be followed to avoid hazards caused due to natural disasters. 5 things that can be followed to avoid hazards caused due to natural disasters. So, if you consider all the natural disasters, what are the things, or what kind of things that we can follow to stop all of these or avoid all of these natural hazards, right? It's mentioned in about 5 things that can be followed to avoid hazards caused due to natural disasters. That means to avoid bad effects because of the natural disasters. What are the things that we can follow? Number 1. First and foremost thing is to minimize the irregular land use and to minimize the cut down of trees. Okay. So by that way we can, avoid the hazards, and also we can avoid the bad influences, and sometimes we can even minimize the danger of droughts and other natural disasters. So number 1, minimizing irregular land use. Minimizing irregular land use. Then other than that, we'll write down a good answer. Now it's important to minimize the release of gases, especially greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide. You know that huge amount of carbon dioxide is getting expelled from the vehicles and the factories and the machines, right, that we use in our day-to-day life. So it's important to minimize the usage of those things. But however, rather than minimizing, my dear children, it's if we can it's much better to use, right, these machines and these vehicles that can run without using fossil fuel. Burning of fossil fuel is the main reason, no? So if we can minimize the burning of fossil fuel, then we can minimize the global warming and removal of other greenhouse gases to the environment. Okay, so we can write minimizing the use of fossil fuel. Right? Minimizing the use of fossil fuel. Next one, number 3. Like the fossil fuel, it's very important to minimize the entry of or minimizing the release of greenhouse gases. So by minimizing the greenhouse gases, we can avoid the global warming process. Carbon dioxide is not only the one and only greenhouse gas that is available in the environment. There are other several gases like chlorofluorocarbon. Most of the times this is referred as CFC. So CFC gas is getting released mainly because of air conditioners, refrigerators, sometimes the perfumes that you are using, these might contain CFC gases. So it's important to minimize these gases like CFC, which are called as greenhouse gases. Okay, so minimizing the release of right? Minimizing the release of greenhouse gases. Minimizing the release of greenhouse gases. Number 4. Using renewable energy sources. So using renewable energy sources like the solar energy, wind power, then sea waves, though using those things also going to minimize the environment pollution and other bad effects. You know that the environment pollution and other bad effects is going to help in creating natural disasters, right? So by minimizing the usage of hazardous energy sources, right, like the fossil fuels, we can minimize the environment pollution. So instead of those things, we can use renewable energy sources like solar power, wind power, and all the other renewable energy sources which are not that much harmful to environment. Next one, protecting, or else instead of protecting we can write minimizing environment pollution. Rather than protecting the environment, we'll write down as minimizing environment pollution. This is the main reason for several kinds of natural disasters, the environment pollution. So by minimizing the environment pollution, we can minimize the hazards events caused due to natural disasters, by dear children. So these are the ways that we can follow, right, that we can follow to avoid hazards caused due to natural disasters. Okay, so minimizing irregular land use, minimizing the use of fossil fuel, minimizing the release of greenhouse gases, using renewable energy sources as much as possible, then minimizing the environment pollution. Right? So by following these things, we can minimize, or we can reduce the effects given out by the natural disasters. Right, then the next type of question is given, my dear children. Let's see. So here you have to put a tick or else a cross according to the true or false nature of the statement. So let's see the statements given. Number 1, floods caused due to dry air currents. Of course, incorrect. Floods are not caused due to dry air currents, right? Floods are caused because of overflowing water due to high rain or heavy rain. So floods are caused due to dry air currents. That is incorrect. Incorrect. Not having proper drainage systems will cause floods. Now that is correct. Instantaneous flood is created because of not having proper drainage systems. So that is correct. Lightning occurs due to static electrical charges. Once again correct. Lightning is going to occur because of the static electrical charges. It is correct. No problem. Next one. Kandy is an area that has a high risk of landslide. Once again correct. Because Kandy is an area, or Kandy is a district that has a high altitude. So it is correct. No problem. Next one. Best place to be safe from a lightning stroke is inside a car. Of course, my dear children, it is correct. We discussed this thing, right? Even when we are doing MCQ questions and also when we are doing these essay type questions, we discuss that inside a car is the best place to be during a lightning condition. Next one. Some animals show abnormal behaviors before a landslide. That is correct. No problem. Before a landslide, right? That's a pre-sign of landslide. Animals showing abnormal behaviors. So it is correct. No problem. Next one. Receiving less than 100 millimeters of rain will cause landslide. Receiving less than 100. It should be not less, it should be more than 100. So this is incorrect. Next one. Lightning danger is common during intermonsoon. Correct. During intermonsoon season, lightning danger is somewhat common to Sri Lanka. Then it is correct. Tall buildings are easily subjected to the hazards of lightning. Once again correct, because tall buildings are somewhat closer to the clouds rather than the ground level, right? So it is correct. Southwest monsoon. Southwest monsoon occurs during November to February. Incorrect. Southwest is not going to occur during November to February. Incorrect, right? Southwest monsoon is going to occur November to February. Incorrect, right? Next one. El Nino effect will not cause lightning. That's correct, right? El Nino effect will not cause lightning, but it will cause drought. So it is correct. El Nino effect will not cause lightning. That is correct. No problem. Most of mobile phones will not attract lightning stroke. That is also correct. Mobile phones can't attract lightning strokes. That is correct. No problem. I told you that in order to attract a lightning stroke, there should be a conductor, right? So most of the mobile phones are not conductors, right? Most of the mobile phones are made up with plastic or else a glassy body. So most of the mobile phones are not going to attract lightning strokes. This is correct. So these are the answers for the third main question, my dear children. Right, then let's head on to see what is the next type of question. Write the correct answer. So here you have to write down the correct answer within the space given, right? Okay. So lightning occur from cloud to cloud is called, very simple my dear children, from cloud to cloud, cloud lightning. Right? Cloud lightning. Cloud lightning. Next one. Temperature of surface water in blank ocean increases by blank effect. So temperature of the surface water is going to increase because of the El Nino effect, right? So the ocean, special ocean is the Pacific Ocean. So here Pacific Ocean, and here El Nino effect. El Nino effect. Next one. High rate of blank in plants cause droughts. High rate of transpiration, right my dear children? So high rate of transpiration is going to reduce the amount of surface and groundwater. So high rate of transpiration, right? High rate of transpiration in plants cause droughts. Next one. Blank is an area with a less risk of landslide. This should be an area with less risk of landslide. So we can mention like area Anuradhapura, Jaffna like area, right? Next one. In Sri Lanka, landslides mainly occur in in Sri Lanka, landslides mainly occur in highlands. But however, in Sri Lanka, these highlands are called as hill country, right? Hill country. Hill country. Next one, blank is used to protect buildings from lightning. Very simple, right? Lightning conductors. Lightning conductors. Right? Lightning conductor. So, lightning conductor is used to protect buildings from lightning. Next one. It's not safe to go blank during lightning. It's not safe to go outside, right? Yes, outside. Very simple. It's not very safe to go outside during lightning. So, always we have to be inside the house during a lightning condition. Next one. Sri Lanka receives rain mainly through what? Sri Lanka receives rain mainly through monsoon rains, right? Yes, monsoon rains. Monsoon rain. So, Sri Lanka receives rain mainly through monsoon rain. Okay. So, these are the answers for the questions given. Right. Explain scientifically. Floods will cause accidents from electricity. Floods will cause accidents from electricity. What is the reason for it? Because water is behaving as a conductor, or water is a conductor. Therefore, when water come in contact with electricity lines, it will cause electrical accidents. Okay, so we can write the answer. Water will conduct electricity. Water will conduct electricity. Therefore, floods may cause accidents due to contacting water with electrical lines. So, this is the reason, my dear children. What is the reason? Water will conduct electricity. Water will conduct electricity. So, therefore, floods may cause accidents due to contacting water with electrical lines. So, upon floods, you know that water is going to come. So, because of having water, the water will come in contact with what? It will come in contact with electrical lines. So, because of that, what will happen? There can be a high risk of having electrical accidents. Right. Global warming will cause changes in wind pattern, of course, because global warming is going to increase or decrease the surface temperature in ocean. Right. Global warming is going to impact, or global warming is going to create the El Nino effect. So therefore, because of that, what will happen? It will cause the changes in wind pattern, right? So we can write El Nino effect will cause El Nino effect will cause the change in wind pattern. So El Nino effect will cause the change in wind pattern. So my dear children, global warming will cause the effect of El Nino, right? Global warming will increase the temperature of surface water in Pacific Ocean. So that is what do you mean by the El Nino effect, right? So here we can write once again, global warming is a reason for El Nino effect. So this is the reason, my dear children. Global warming will cause changes in wind pattern. Okay, it's because that El Nino effect is the one which is causing the changes in wind pattern. The El Nino effect means the increasing of surface temperature in the water of Pacific Ocean. No? So this temperature will increase because of what? Because of the global warming. So global warming is a reason for the creation of El Nino effect. So that's the reason. Right. Change in wind pattern will cause droughts. Change in wind pattern will definitely change the rainfall pattern. So sometimes it will reduce the amount of rainfall, creating a drought. So that's the main reason. So we can write the answer. Change in wind pattern will change the rainfall pattern. Therefore, due to lack of rain, droughts will occur. Right? So change in wind pattern will change the rainfall pattern. Therefore, due to lack of rain, droughts will occur. So this is the explanation for the given sentence in here. Next one. Lightning is created due to static electrical charges. Of course, right? Because the static electrical charges are not going to be enough at a certain time, which are generated on the cloud. So those will come to ground as a lightning stroke. So these static electrical charges are getting created because of rubbing clouds together. Okay, so we can write, when rubbing particles in cloud. When rubbing particles each other in clouds, right? When rubbing particles each other in clouds, particles are charged. Particles are charged. Therefore, these charges will travel as lightning. So let's see. When rubbing particles each other in clouds, particles are charged, right? Particles are charged. Therefore, these charges will travel as lightning. So these static electrical charges are the ones which are going to pass from one place to another as lightning. Okay, right. Cloud lightning is not dangerous to organisms living on Earth. So we know that cloud lightning is going to occur between two clouds. However, the organisms are living on the Earth now, so there is no effect for the organisms who are living in the Earth. So we can write the answer. Cloud lightning occurs between two clouds. Therefore, it is not harmful. To organisms on Earth. So cloud lightning occurs between two clouds. So therefore, it is not harmful to organisms on Earth. That's the explanation, right? Very simple. Next one. When altitude is high, there is a greater risk of landslide. Landslide means coming down of soil with muddy water. So when having high altitude, right, what will happen? That speed will get increase. So therefore, there is a high risk of getting landslide. What is the reason for increase in the speed? Because when the altitude is high, the potential energy whereby the soil is going to increase because of the gravitational force. So that's the main reason in increasing the potential or increasing the risk of landslide in highland areas. Okay, so we can write the answer. When altitude is high, there is a greater risk of landslide? Because, my dear children, because when there is high altitude, because when there is high altitude, because when there is high altitude, the potential energy because when there is high altitude, the potential energy in soil will increase. Right? So, when altitude is high, there is a greater risk of landslide, because when there is high altitude, the potential energy in soil will increase. That's the reason. Okay. Right. Next one. Some animals show abnormal behaviors before a natural disaster. It's mainly because these animals can listen, or these animals can hear. Okay. These animals can hear very small vibrations, or some animals are very sensitive to small vibrations. So therefore, they can detect these small vibrations and they will show abnormal behaviors. Okay, that's the reason. So we can write the answer. Some animals are sensitive. Some animals are sensitive. Some animals are sensitive to, right? Some animals are sensitive to small vibrations. Therefore, these animals can detect natural disasters. So, some animals are sensitive to small vibrations. Therefore, these animals can detect natural disasters. That's the reason that they are showing abnormal behaviors. Next one. It's not safe to use a telephone during lightning. So, telephone, not mobile phones, telephones. Telephones are operated with electrical cables or conducting cables. So, electricity is connected with the telephone. So, therefore, there is a high risk of getting electrocuted because of lightning. So, we can write the answer. Telephones use conducting wires. Right? Telephones use conducting wires. Therefore, it's not safe to use telephones. during lightning. Right? So telephones use conducting wires. Therefore, it's not safe to use telephones during lightning. Okay? Right. Mulching is a good agricultural remedy to fight against drought. So, we discussed that mulching is a good agricultural way, right? So, in here, we reduce the release of water to the environment, okay, by the mulching process. So, it will help to retain water within the soil, right? It will help to retain water within the soil. So, my dear children, mulching helps to retain water within the ground. Okay, it can retain water within the ground for a long time period because of mulching. So, if the water is retained within the ground for a long time period, that will help to fight against the drought. Okay, so we can write the answer. Mulching helps to retain water. Mulching helps to retain water within the ground. Therefore, it helps to, right? Mulching helps to retain water within the ground. Therefore, it helps to fight against drought. Right? So, retaining water within the ground level, right? Retaining water within the ground level helps to fight against the drought. Okay? That's why, my dear children, mulching is going to help to fight against the drought. Okay? So, mulching is a process that can be used to retain more water within the ground level. Right? Okay. Drought increases the energy crisis. Drought is going to increase the energy crisis. So, we discussed that energy or the electricity is generated by hydropower stations. So, these hydropower stations is going to reduce the amount of water, or the reservoirs are going to reduce the amount of water. Less water is given out by the reservoirs to generate hydropower electricity. So, in that case, electricity production will be interrupted. Because of that, energy crisis will increase. So, we can write the answer. Drought reduces the water level. Therefore, drought reduces the water. Therefore, hydropower stations right? Drought reduces the water. Therefore, hydropower stations will not be able to produce electricity. Right? So drought reduces the water. Therefore, hydropower stations will not be able to produce electricity, increasing the energy crisis. Increasing the energy crisis. So my dear children, this is the reason. Drought reduces the water. You know that drought is going to reduce the water. Therefore, hydropower stations will not be able to produce electricity, increasing the energy crisis. So this will increase the energy crisis. Right. Then the next question. So complete the table given. So natural disasters given, my dear children, then you have to write down the reasons. So writing down one reason is enough, right? So there can be several reasons, but however, writing down one will be enough, okay? As they have not mentioned any number, so writing down one reason will be enough. So what's the main reason for a drought? You know that the drought is going to occur mainly because of lack of water or scarcity of water. So we can write down the answer as lack of water, right? Due to lack of rainfall. Then landslide. Landslide and flood, both the things occur due to heavy rain. Okay, so we can write a reason for landslide as heavy rain. Heavy rain, right? If you want, you can include more than 100 millimeters, right? More than 100 millimeters. Then next one, flood. Flood is going to occur mainly because of heavy rain, right? And also because of blocking drains. So heavy rain, then blocking drains. Right? Due to heavy rain and because of blocking drains, flood will occur. Then the final one, lightning. We know that the lightning is going to occur because of the static electrical charges. So the main reason behind lightning is due to static electrical charges, right? Due to static electrical charges. Right then, so these are the main reasons for the occurrence of each and every natural disaster that we have discussed under the lesson. First one, my dear children, drought because of lack of rain, because of lack of water due to lack of rainfall. Water is getting lack because of the lack of rainfall, right? Next one, landslide. Heavy rain, right, is the main reason. Actually, more than 100 millimeters. Okay, if the rain is going to occur more than 100 millimeters, right, then landslides may occur. Then the next one, flood. Heavy rain and also blocking drains, right? Then lightning due to static electrical charges, right? So these are the main reasons for the occurrence of natural disasters that we discussed within this lesson part, my dear children. Now with that question, we have finished several other types of questions rather than the MCQs, several other types of questions related to the natural disasters lesson. Okay, so we have discussed all the types and we have answered several questions related to the natural disasters lesson from each and every type, my dear children. So I hope that you got a good knowledge regarding the final lesson in our syllabus, right? So it's now we have finished our science syllabus, my dear children. Now it's very important to follow up these lessons and to carry out the exercises in order to replenish your knowledge so that you can write good answers for the upcoming examinations. Okay, so until we meet again, it's time to say goodbye. So with a new chapter, with a new lesson part, and when discussing about the papers or when discussing about the questions, I'll be hoping to meet you with a new lesson part. So till then, it's time to say goodbye.
To watch these important lessons, subscribe to DP Education's YouTube channel right now. Click on the bell icon to stay updated on the latest lessons. Sri Lanka's largest free online school, DP Education.